From World War II hero to Texas congressman, UN ambassador, CIA director, vice president, and then president, George H.W. Bush has left a lasting legacy on this country. But when asked about that 6 years ago, he said he banned the L word, adding, "I think history will point out the things I did wrong and perhaps some of the things I did right." Here to discuss all those things from our Washington bureau is CBS's Bob Schieffer. Bob, good morning.
Good morning.
It really was a heck of a life, wasn't it?
Well, it was. You know, I covered him in the 1980 campaign when he ran unsuccessfully for president, and then his 88 campaign when he was elected. And I will never forget the first time I ever interviewed him. He actually, in 1980, won the Iowa caucuses and beat Reagan and so forth. And he was on CBS the next morning, and I said, "So how do you feel?" He said, "I feel like I've got Big Mo." And I said, "What?" He said, "Big Mo, Big Mo." And I said, "I'd never heard this term." And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean." He said, momentum. I've got the big momentum." And I said, "Oh."
It's the sports side of him there, Bob, without a doubt.
Exactly.
Has anyone ever been more qualified to be president than President Bush was?
You know, that's a very good question, because he was very well qualified. He had been an elected politician. He'd been chairman of the Republican National Committee. Later on, he was the head of the CIA. He was our first envoy to China after we recognized China. He really was, especially in foreign policy, prepared. But the interesting thing about him, even though he was a war hero, you know, he was the youngest pilot shot down in a fighter plane in World War II. He truly was an entrepreneur. He had this great, ability to go to Texas and start up his own company. And yet he was so nice. He was so proper. That some people mistook that for weakness. And Newsweek in the 88 campaign actually ran a cover with his picture on the front that said the wimp factor.
Yeah,
well, he was anything but a wimp. And yet his people said, we've got to change this image. That year he lost in Iowa. They redid the campaign. They went to New Hampshire, and the way they decided to make him be more manly, as it were, is he abandoned the coat and tie, started wearing tractor hats and windbreakers and things like that, and drove every piece of heavy machinery that he could find in New Hampshire. I mean, at one point somebody said to me, "Hide the forklift, Mama, George Bush is coming." He would drive tractors. He would drive snow plows. And once he drove this 18-wheeler truck. He only drove it around a parking lot, and the Secret Service was hanging off the side, but he was driving around out there, tooting the horn. Honk, honk, it would go. And the thing is, American politics being what it is, he won. He beat Bob Dole and went on to get the nomination. But he was truly one of the kindest and people that I ever knew. He probably had more friends than any president I ever knew. And he didn't write his own biography. He was so shy about being in public life, but he never lost the opportunity to write people a thank you note. And there must be 1 million of them out there somewhere. He was really a nice man.
And Bob, I think about those two Senate races that he lost, and the first bid for president that he lost. Defeat never defined George Bush, did it?
No, for just the way we're talking about. But, you know, I think you all talked in the beginning of, was he the most qualified person to ever take the office? I mean, who knows what qualifies someone to be president? But he had all of this experience. And in the end, I think what we'll remember him for is, number one, the invasion of Iraq. When Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, he drove him out. American forces did, and he got other countries in that region to pay for it, which was a remarkable thing. But I think even more important than that in history, he was the one who was in office when the Soviet Union came apart, when it collapsed. And I think the way he guided American reaction to that. He would not allow, a lot of bragging and talking about how, we're superior to them and all that. He just kind of played it cool, and I think the tone that he took, other countries, our allies and friends, took the very same tone, and I think it probably got us through a very difficult time that who knows what might have happened if some desperate person in the Soviet Union, they had all these nuclear weapons, had decided to try to overturn this. So I think he gets great credit for that.
Bob, we just have a minute left here, but at the end of the Gulf War, which you mentioned, of course, President Bush's approval rating was almost 90%, and yet he ended up losing the next election to Bill Clinton. How hard was that defeat for him?
Well, it was very difficult because what it was, he had to break a campaign promise. He had gone through that campaign with the mantra, no new taxes. Read my lips, no new taxes. And then the country got into an economic bind, and he had to do just that. And they were, the American people somehow, his popularity went down sharply, and he lost the election.
The last great soldier, statesman, and certainly a different era of politics and politician. Bob Schieffer, thank you for sharing the memories. Thank you.
You bet.